Samantha Everhart glided into the grand hall with the confidence of a queen, every eye turning toward her as she prepared to make an announcement that would change her life forever. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting off the polished marble floor, while the aroma of fresh-cut roses, flown in from a private estate, perfumed the air. The entire Everhart family, along with influential acquaintances who often graced the pages of society magazines, paused mid-conversation. Nobody knew that Samantha's world had been quietly shattering for months. Tonight, among the clinking of crystal glasses and murmurs of anticipation, she would deliver her bombshell, the end of her marriage to billionaire Lucas Everhart. Samantha Everhart was often described as ethereal. She possessed an elegance that seemed both otherworldly and deeply rooted in reality. Part of this allure was her upbringing. Born Samantha Fairwind, an only child to two influential philanthropists in Northern California, her parents, Gregory and Helena Fairwind, had made a modest fortune investing in sustainable energy businesses before the rest of the world caught on. As a result, Samantha grew up in a labyrinth of ivy-covered mansions, exclusive boarding schools, and summer holidays on the Amalfi Coast. Despite the privilege surrounding her, Samantha never carried herself with arrogance. From a young age, she had learned that wealth could buy silence, but not truth. It could fund beauty, but never guarantee love. Her heart had always belonged to the quiet moments. The brush of a paint stroke at a museum, the sound of waves crashing under a blood-orange sunset, the way her mother held her hand tightly during charity tours in impoverished towns. These memories, soft but grounding, shaped a woman who could move through ballrooms with grace, but never forgot to look behind her. She cultivated an appreciation for the arts, championed environmental causes, and developed a keen sense for reading people's intentions. When Samantha was 21, she met Lucas Everhart at a fundraising gala organized by her parents in San Francisco. Lucas was already forging his path in the tech world, a brilliant, ambitious young man who had developed a groundbreaking software platform. Tall, impeccably groomed, and exuding confidence, Lucas made everyone in the room feel like the center of his attention. His eyes sparkled whenever he talked about his future plans, and the intensity of his vision sparked something in Samantha. That night, they danced beneath glittering chandeliers, shared laughter over champagne, and found themselves deep in conversation until well past midnight. It wasn't just the words he used that drew her in. It was the way he looked at her, like she was a mystery he wanted to spend his whole life unraveling. She remembered the sensation vividly, the warmth of his hand at her back as they glided across the ballroom, the rare vulnerability in his laugh when she teased him about his terrible French pronunciation. Something about that night felt like destiny unfolding beneath their feet. Their courtship blossomed quickly. Samantha's parents recognized Lucas's potential and admired his perseverance. Some whispered that Lucas came from a modest background, raised by a single mother in a cramped Oakland apartment, always scraping by. But that only fueled his ambition. He didn't want to merely succeed. He wanted to transform entire industries. Not long after their first meeting, Lucas's startup, Novacor, landed a series of monumental deals. Venture capital poured in, catapulting him from an entrepreneurial whiz-kid to a wunderkind in the eyes of influential financiers. Names like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett were whispered around him, praising his innovative spirit. Through every milestone, Samantha stood beside him, not just as a partner, but as a believer. She stayed up through countless pitch rehearsals, whispered encouragements before shareholder meetings, and held his hand through the chaos of early fame. She thought they were building something unshakable, and maybe they were, until the foundation began to shift beneath her feet. Within 2 years, Samantha and Lucas were married in a lavish ceremony at the Fairwind estate. Roses from a prestigious British supplier decorated the garden. The bride wore a custom gown by a revered French designer, and the who's who of high society, including Oprah Winfrey and philanthropic icon Melinda Gates, attended. It was an event covered by the nation's top magazines, each hailing the couple as a new power duo in technology and philanthropy. But beneath the glitz and glamour, the marriage carried a darker undercurrent. Lucas's charm was undeniable, yet so was his burning desire for success and recognition, and insatiable thirst that pushed him to work 15-hour days, travel relentlessly, and embrace risk-taking in all forms. He confided to Samantha early on that he wanted to be the biggest name in tech, overshadowing anyone who came before him. At first, Samantha admired this unstoppable ambition. She believed it would pave the way for philanthropic endeavors they both dreamed of supporting, from global educational programs to sweeping environmental reforms. As Lucas's star rose, so did the fortress they built around themselves. Their combined net worth soared into the billions, and with that came an entourage of advisors, staff, bodyguards, and sycophants. It became difficult to distinguish genuine friendships from calculated alliances built on Lucas's influence. Yet, in those early years of marriage, Samantha and Lucas remained close, at least during the fleeting moments Lucas wasn't traveling for work. The Everhart estate, nestled in the heart of a private enclave in Marin County, became a glass castle designed by a renowned architect. The structure was a mesmerizing blend of modern glass facades and classical stone pillars, an architectural masterpiece frequently featured in lifestyle magazines. From the outside, people saw an impenetrable fortress of wealth and style. But Samantha knew it as a place where she often roamed alone. Every hallway gleamed. Every room was curated to perfection, but the silence between the walls echoed louder than any applause they ever received. At night, she would sit in the solarium with a cup of tea, staring through the transparent ceiling at a moonlit sky, wondering how a home so grand could feel so hollow. When Lucas was away, she filled her days with philanthropic projects, connecting local schools with arts programs, hosting lavish dinners for climate change initiatives, and championing mental health awareness. She became a beloved figure in charitable circles. Her warmth, intelligence, and willingness to collaborate endeared her to many. Yet, something was missing. That absence was not just Lucas's body. It was his presence, his soul, the quiet space where laughter once lived and gentle touches once lingered. Samantha would sometimes reach for her phone, fingers hovering over his contact, only to stop. What would she say? That she missed him? That she felt invisible in their glass empire? Lucas's ambition had transformed from unstoppable to corrosive. He spent more nights in California's Silicon Valley, then jetted off to Europe to secure new deals. The fleeting romantic dinners they once shared turned into email updates or hurried phone calls. Even when Lucas was physically present, his mind was usually tethered to the next big pitch or investor meeting. Samantha found herself living in a perpetual state of longing. She tried to communicate this, but Lucas, ever the problem solver, interpreted her concerns as just another issue to be checked off a list rather than a plea for emotional intimacy. Each conversation left her feeling smaller, like a whisper in the wind of his ambition. She didn't want a solution. She wanted to be heard, to be held, to be remembered not as a fixture of his success, but as the woman he once couldn't look away from. As time passed, subtle changes began to erode Samantha's belief in their union. She caught glimpses of disconcerting behavior, moments where Lucas would discreetly lower his voice to take calls, or when a dinner with colleagues suddenly seemed to include a few too many female associates. Yet, for many years, the fear that something nefarious was happening remained an unspoken, nagging anxiety at the back of her mind. After all, Lucas was not just her husband. He was the father of their two children, Mason and Eliza, and the media loved him. He was the visionary, a business mogul who gave compelling speeches at global conferences proclaiming how the future of tech could save the planet. But every perfect facade eventually cracks. Summer arrived in Marin County with warm breezes and a hint of blossoming jasmine drifting through the air. Samantha was preparing the family for a vacation to Lake Tahoe, a tradition she and Lucas had started a few years back as a way to reconnect. She felt a spark of hope that this trip could bring them closer. However, Lucas's schedule had shifted at the last minute. He claimed a critical meeting with a new investor from Milan had come up, so he would fly separately and meet them there. In the past, Samantha might have accepted such a change with minimal suspicion. But now, a nagging voice in her head questioned every deviation from a plan. And in that voice was something else, something she hated admitting: doubt. Not just about Lucas, but about herself. Was she no longer enough? Had the years, the children, the routine dimmed the version of Samantha that Lucas once adored? It was a thought that slithered beneath her confidence like a hairline fracture in a mirror, invisible to most, but impossible for her to unsee. That voice grew stronger when Samantha stumbled upon Lucas's phone buzzing unattended in his study. The device was usually locked behind biometric security, but at that moment it was open, displaying a message from an unfamiliar sender. Missing you. Can't wait to see you again. Hey. Her heart hammered as she read the words. She had no proof of who it might be, but it was enough to raise goosebumps on her arms. A sense of dread twisted her stomach inside out. She placed the phone down as if it were on fire and stepped away, adrenaline surging through her veins. Over the following days, she noticed additional signs. Lucas would disappear for hours when they were supposed to be working from home together, or he'd receive a message in the middle of a conversation and abruptly change the subject. Growing distant, Samantha, torn between confronting him outright and preserving the fragile sense of normalcy that remained, began feeling like an intruder in her own marriage. There were nights she stared at herself in the mirror, wondering where the vibrant woman she used to be had gone. She still looked the part, graceful, composed, but inside, she felt like she was aging in invisible ways. She hated that she questioned her worth based on his actions, but the insecurity seeped in all the same, subtle and corrosive. One evening, while hosting a charity dinner, Samantha exchanged glances with a longtime friend, Evelyn Marcus, who was aware of the toll Lucas's absence was taking on her. Evelyn shot her a sympathetic look from across the table as Lucas regaled other guests with stories of his latest business triumphs. To the untrained ear, everything he said sounded glorious and groundbreaking, but Samantha could detect a hollow ring to his words. The Lucas she fell in love with had once prioritized deep human connection. The man who now sat across from her felt more like a charismatic hologram, performing for an audience. After the dinner, Evelyn approached Samantha in the large foyer lit by overhead chandeliers. "You look so exhausted," Evelyn said gently, placing a hand on Samantha's arm. "Maybe it's time you step away from all this. Even briefly, you deserve a break." Samantha managed a polite smile. "Thank you for caring. Really, I just need some fresh air," she added before Evelyn could protest. Samantha excused herself and slipped out into the garden under the moonlight. The air was cooler, and the scent of night-blooming jasmine helped soothe her nerves. 1,000 conflicting thoughts raced through her mind. Could she be misunderstanding? The messages on Lucas's phone could be an investor or a colleague using a flirtatious tone. Samantha clung to every thin possibility, desperate to convince herself that her suspicion was just a manifestation of loneliness. But Samantha was no fool. She could recognize the difference between corporate formality and intimate secrecy. Despite her misgivings, she continued forward, half in denial. She wasn't ready to accept betrayal because to do so would mean facing a crumbling reality she had invested her life in. It would mean dismantling the very image of success and stability she had helped Lucas build. It would mean looking her children in the eyes and explaining why their father wasn't coming home the same man anymore. Then everything changed. 2 weeks later, Samantha received an anonymous email. It read, "Lucas has been seeing someone else for months. Check his itinerary for his business trip to Milan." Attached was a single photograph. Lucas stepping out of a luxury car in California, his arm around a slender blonde woman in her late 20s. The look on Lucas's face was not platonic. Her fingers trembled as she zoomed into the image. There was something unmistakably intimate in the way he leaned toward the woman, something too familiar in the half-smile on his faciest smile she once believed was reserved for her. Samantha felt a vice tighten around her heart as she examined the photo again and again. Her first reaction was to confront him immediately, but Lucas was away coincidentally, or perhaps noting another business trip. She tried his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She considered calling his assistant, Danielle, but realized she wanted answers from Lucas himself, not some carefully staged explanation. Anguish roiled in her stomach, but a quiet part of her mind urged restraint. She needed to be certain, needed more than just a photograph and an anonymous email. The next few days turned Samantha into a detective of sorts. She discreetly interviewed Lucas's driver, a loyal employee who had been with the family for years. He confirmed that Lucas had made several unplanned detours to an upscale townhouse in San Francisco. Each time, he insisted the driver wait around the corner to avoid detection. Samantha listened without interrupting, her jaw clenched so tightly she thought she might crack a molar. She nodded, thanked him softly, then went to her study and closed the door. Alone, she wept, not just from betrayal, but from the shame of ever doubting her own instincts. Samantha also found a receipt from a boutique hotel in Los Angeles, a place Lucas once claimed he detested for its lack of privacy. Yet, the receipt was for a romantic suite complete with champagne and an in-room spa service. Slowly, every suspicion sharpened into reality. It wasn't just the betrayal that shook Samantha. It was the betrayal by the man who had promised her a lifetime partnership built on trust and honesty. The father of her children, the philanthropic visionary who told the world about ethical leadership and moral integrity. She felt livid and humiliated, but above all, she felt a heartbreak on a scale she had never imagined. What Samantha didn't expect was how quickly events would spiral out of her control. Determined to confront Lucas privately, she waited until he was due to return from another crucial meeting, this time in London. She planned to have him meet her at the Everhart estate for a quiet discussion before the annual Everhart family reunion, a grand affair that brought the extended family together for a weekend every year. Lucas's parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and even second cousins gathered from all over the globe at the estate. They would hold barbecues, philanthropic auctions, and heartfelt toasts about unity and legacy. However, Lucas's flight got in late, and by the time he arrived at the estate, the entire clan was already present. The mansion teemed with laughter, clinking glasses, and excited chatter reverberating through the halls. Lucas walked in wearing a sharp navy suit, carrying an air of exhausted triumph. He greeted various relatives while Samantha stood at the foot of the sweeping staircase, her heart pounding with anticipation. She was still deciding whether to drag him aside immediately or wait until the festivities concluded. But fate had other plans. As if orchestrated by some cosmic design, Lucas's phone slipped out of his pocket while hugging his mother, landing face down on the marble floor. An audible gasp echoed through the foyer. One of the teenage cousins picked it up and handed it back to him, but not before the screen lit up with a text from Alyssa, the same name Samantha had seen in multiple clues. "You did great, babe. Can't wait to see you next week." Lucas fumbled with the phone, his cheeks flushing. He tried to dismiss it with a forced laugh, but eyes from various corners of the foyer lingered on the exchange. Some relatives looked puzzled. Others politely averted their gaze. Only Samantha noticed that beneath Lucas's polished exterior, panic flickered in his eyes. He excused himself to slip into his study, presumably to compose himself. Samantha followed, her anger fueling her steps. Once inside, she shut the heavy mahogany door behind her. The study was lined with bookshelves containing rare first editions, many of them gifts from philanthropic friends. Lucas faced her, a tense expression across his face. "What do you want me to say?" he asked finally, his voice unsteady. Samantha looked at him, sadness and fury twisting in her chest. "I want you to tell me the truth. Who is she?" He swallowed hard, glancing at the door as if to ensure they were alone. Then, as if some dam had broken, he began talking, denying nothing and explaining everything. Her name was Alyssa Madison, he said, a financial consultant who got entangled with him after a series of late-night meetings. Lucas insisted it had started innocently, that she was just a bright mind who aided him in expanding Novacore's global reach. Then the lines blurred. He said stress, ambition, and the glamour of success all converged into a toxic mixture. Before he knew it, he had crossed moral boundaries. Though Samantha could see Lucas trembling, she found little room for empathy. His confession didn't heal the wounds. It poured salt on them. Every new detail felt like a betrayal 10 times over. She tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy, as if the very walls of the room pressed in on her. Some part of her had known, or feared, or suspected, but hearing it spoken aloud ripped away her last defenses. Her thoughts spun. Was it her fault for being too predictable, too wrapped up in the children? Had she become invisible to him? She had imagined infidelity in dark, quiet hours, but reality was sharper than any nightmare. Each word he spoke landed like a stone thrown at stained glass, shattering illusions she had fought to keep intact. She watched the man she once trusted turn into a stranger before her very eyes. And for the first time, she saw just how far he had drifted from the promises they once whispered in the quiet. Yet, she forced herself to stand tall and maintain composure, if only for a moment. The annual family dinner was about to commence in the grand hall. Waitstaff bustled around, setting up elaborately decorated long tables, shining silver cutlery, and ensuring vintage wines were at the perfect temperature. Outside, children ran and played under the watchful eyes of nannies. Uncles and cousins gathered on the terrace, engaged in lively debate over business, sports, and philanthropic projects. Ordinarily, Samantha would have been the gracious hostess. This time, she felt like an actress in a tragedy about to reach its climax. She walked among the guests like a ghost wearing velvet. Every smile, every polite nod, a silent scream buried beneath poise. The scent of heirloom roses mixed with the metallic taste of anxiety at the back of her throat. Her hands, though steady at her sides, felt like they were gripping shards of memory. She longed to run, to escape this mansion, these people, this night. But she knew that would only leave the lie intact. And more than anything, she needed to reclaim her voice. Not for revenge, not for spectacle, but for truth. Instead of stalling, Samantha decided to confront Lucas publicly. It was not an act of revenge, but a need for the truth to surface. She had spent months grappling with loneliness, heartbreak, and suspicion. To continue with pleasantries would break her spirit irreparably. She reasoned that Lucas's affair was not just a personal betrayal, but also a lie lived among the very relatives who adored him. So, as the family gathered for dinner, Samantha quietly signaled the head butler to hold the first course. She tapped her crystal wine glass with a spoon, a gentle chime that swiftly captured everyone's attention. Conversations ceased and heads turned toward her. Lucas shot her a fearful look from across the room. Samantha's pulse raced, but outwardly she appeared calm, regal. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of a person who has never needed to raise her tone to be heard. "I know you all flew in from different corners of the world to be here tonight. I'm grateful for your presence, more than you know." Murmurs of approval and curiosity rippled through the crowd. Lucas's father, Edward Everhart, observed her intently, and his mother, Margaret, looked perplexed but intrigued. The younger cousins grew silent, sensing something bigger was afoot. Samantha continued. "This evening was meant to be a celebration of family unity and the collective memories that bind us together. Unfortunately, there's something heavy on my heart that I can't keep hidden any longer." Samantha paused, taking a measured breath. "Lucas and I, well, let's just say our marriage is not the perfect picture you might imagine. In fact, I've decided I'm leaving him." A stunned silence dropped over the room. Gasps, whispers, and the clatter of silverware rang out like a discordant symphony. Lucas stiffened, his knuckles whitening around the back of his chair. He opened his mouth to speak, but Samantha raised a hand to signal she was not yet finished. "I make this announcement with the deepest regret, but also with honesty. Lucas has strayed." Her voice grew uneven, though she summoned every ounce of grace to keep her emotions in check. "I can't, in good conscience, remain silent and pretend otherwise. This is my choice, and I believe it's the right one." The weight of the truth, once held behind quiet smiles and forced laughter, now unfurled itself across the room like thunder following lightning. Samantha's heart raced, not from fear, but from the ache of finally letting go. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides, but her gaze did not falter. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it gently and stared at the sea of shocked faces. Distant cousins, uncles, aunts, Lucas's parents, and her own 2 children, who looked on from the far side of the table in confusion and fear. Samantha's heart broke for them, but she pressed on. "I need you all to understand," she said, her voice choking slightly, "that I've tried. I have tried for years to hold on to the family we built together, through Lucas's successes and struggles. But there's only so much deception a heart can endure. I'm sorry if this ruins your evening." Her throat tightened with grief for the life she once fought for, the life she was now releasing into memory. She could feel the burn of every unspoken plea, every unanswered message, every lonely night when she lay awake listening to the hollow sound of her husband's absence. Lucas's voice cut through the air, shaky yet forceful. "Samantha, please, we can talk about this privately. There's no need to do it here, in front of everyone." A single ripple of tension passed through the crowd. Samantha stood taller, her eyes brimming with heartbreak, yet unwavering in her resolution. "I beg you to talk privately, Lucas. For months, I reached out, hoping you'd open up about what was happening between us. You shut me out. So now, I'm done knocking on a door that won't open." Her words didn't carry anger. They carried resignation, the kind that comes after endless tries, after hope has withered into silence. The crowd wasn't just witnessing a marital breakdown. They were witnessing a woman reclaiming the last pieces of herself. A murmur of shock and sympathy spread through the hall. Lucas's father, Edward Everhart, rubbed his temple in disbelief. His mother, Margaret, placed a trembling hand over her mouth. Lucas's siblings exchanged stunned glances. Evelyn Marcus, who had joined as a friend of the family, stood near the back with tears welling in her eyes. It was a moment that would forever divide the before and after of Samantha's life in a single, decisive act. She had shattered the veil of illusion that draped their public image. Lucas looked like a man who had been cornered by the consequences of his own actions, his complexion pale, his once confident posture faltering. In the immediate aftermath, the grand hall resembled a chamber of echoes. A flurry of overlapping reactions rippled among the guests. Some relatives rushed to Samantha, arms extended, offering comfort. Others swarmed Lucas, demanding an explanation. The staff stood awkwardly to the side, unsure whether to continue serving or retreat from the emotional battlefield. Samantha, feeling dizzy from adrenaline, managed a nod to the head butler, who silently understood it was best to serve dinner in smaller, separate settings for anyone still wishing to eat. The large family meal they had planned would not be happening. She turned, searching for her children, Mason and Eliza. They had been playing in the adjacent hallway moments before her announcement, but now she saw them at the hall's entrance, eyes wide with fear. "Mom," Mason ventured, stepping forward. The 12-year-old was tall for his age, and his eyes flicked back and forth between Samantha and Lucas. Eliza, only 8, clung to Mason's arm, looking on the verge of tears. Samantha knelt down to their level, ignoring the swirl of grown-up chaos behind her. "Sweethearts," she said softly, "I'm so sorry you had to hear that. Your father and I, we love you very much. That will never change." She opened her arms, and they both leaned into her embrace, confusion etched in their small faces. Lucas walked over, his face stricken. He tried to reach out to them, but Mason instinctively tensed, and Eliza shifted closer to Samantha. Lucas's expression crumpled at the sight, but he drew back, as if aware he was the cause of their fear. From a few feet away, Lucas's mother, Margaret, watched the heartbreaking scene, tears glistening in her eyes. She hovered near them, wanting to help but uncertain how. Eventually, she stepped forward and gently patted Samantha's shoulder. "My dear, is there anything I can do?" Samantha looked up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Right now, I just need some space. I'm sorry. I know this is difficult for you, too." Margaret nodded, swallowing her own pain. It was a complicated moment for her. She loved her son unconditionally, but she had also grown to admire and cherish Samantha as the daughter she never had. In another corner, Edward Everhart had cornered Lucas. His voice was low and urgent. Edward was a commanding presence, a retired CEO who had never shied away from making his opinions known. From his stern expression, it was clear that the conversation was anything but pleasant. Later that evening, once most of the family had dispersed to different wings of the mansion or retreated to nearby hotels, Samantha found herself in the quietude of the mansion's small private library. It was one of her favorite rooms. Dark cherrywood shelves lined with literature from all eras, a plush reading chair near an ornate fireplace, and a wide window that overlooked the sprawling grounds. She sank into the chair, exhausted and heartbroken. Memories swept over her like a tidal wave. She recalled the early days of her relationship with Lucas, how he would speak passionately about bridging global communities through technology, how they volunteered at soup kitchens together when Nova Corps was in its infancy, how they once spent a spontaneous night dancing in Golden Gate Park to a random street violinist just because it felt magical. In one memory, she saw herself after she had lost a dear college friend to an unexpected illness. She had been inconsolable, but Lucas had arrived at her door with takeout from her favorite Thai place, a homemade CD of soothing piano music, and arms ready to hold her through her grief. They used to communicate so effortlessly, as if their souls were in constant conversation. When had that changed? She couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but it was likely when Lucas's star soared too close to the sun. And what haunted her most was the quiet suspicion that she had seen the cracks long ago, but chose not to speak. There had been moments when she considered counseling, even separation, but always dismissed them, telling herself it was just a phase, that they would bounce back like they always had. She told herself she was being dramatic, overly sensitive, too emotional. Their philanthropic projects were meant to keep them bonded. They had co-founded the Everhart Fairwind Initiative to support underprivileged youth in developing nations, even traveling to remote villages in Africa and Southeast Asia. Photographs of those trips, capturing their sweaty smiles and hopeful hearts, adorned the library walls. Yet, as Lucas's empire grew, so did the demands on his time and attention. The simplest sign that something was off had been his emotional unavailability. He no longer asked about Samantha's day or her goals. Everything became overshadowed by talk of IPOs, acquisitions, and product launches. She had clung to the image of their former selves like a woman gripping a lifeboat, even when the waves of reality began to crash. There were nights she cried silently in bed while he snored beside her, and she told herself it was temporary, that if she were just more patient, more understanding, it would pass. But hadn't. Rubbing her temples, Samantha felt a surge of tears she had been holding back all day. She had tried so hard to maintain the marriage, especially for the children. But the moment she discovered indisputable evidence of Lucas's affair, it became clear she had been the only one fighting to preserve it. Down the hall in a smaller guest suite, Lucas paced back and forth. His tie was undone, and his suit jacket lay crumpled on a chair. He looked like a man who had just glimpsed the enormity of what he stood to lose. Hours ago, he was the billionaire tech magnate who could dazzle a room with his charm. Now, the family he claimed to cherish stood on the brink of collapse because of his recklessness. He stared at the message notifications on his phone from Alyssa. Guilt needled him. More messages arrived, some supportive, others demanding to know why he wasn't responding. He tossed the device onto the bed, unwilling to face the proof of his infidelity. His father's words still echoed in his mind. "You're a fool, Lucas. Your mother and I raised you to value loyalty and family. I didn't build a legacy for you to tarnish it this way." Lucas had tried to defend himself, but every excuse crumbled under the weight of his own guilt. He realized how fragile his meticulously curated public image truly was. More importantly, he realized how gravely he had wounded Samantha, a woman he once believed to be his perfect partner, who had supported him more than anyone else ever had. A quiet knock sounded at the door. He opened it to find his sister, Julia Everhart, one of the few people in the family who always spoke her mind. She was 3 years older with the same dark hair and commanding presence as Lucas, though she had chosen a more private path, working as a clinical psychologist. She stepped into the room, crossing her arms. "What have you done?" she asked, her voice filled with a disappointed edge that stung worse than any insult. Lucas sank onto the edge of the bed, burying his face in his hands. "I don't know. I messed up. Badly." Julia stood in front of him. "This isn't just some minor mess up. You betrayed Samantha in the worst way possible, and now you're risking losing your children's respect. Are you really willing to go through with a divorce?" Lucas looked up, desperation gleaming in his eyes. "No, I don't want to lose her. I never wanted this to get so out of control. I'm an idiot. Alyssa was a mistake that I let go on for too long. He trailed off, breath hitching in his throat. Julia's features softened. She took a seat beside her brother, her hand resting lightly on his back. "It's time to figure out what matters most, Lucas. You're brilliant at making deals, at forging global partnerships, but you've forgotten how to nurture the one partnership that should matter more than any business deal: your marriage." Tears gathered in Lucas's eyes. Julia had never seen him cry before, and the sight of it broke her heart. This was a man who had scaled the highest peaks of success only to find himself shattered by his own selfish choices. "What can I do?" he asked, as though searching for an immediate solution. Julia sighed. "Talk to Samantha. Really talk to her. Apologize, but don't expect instant forgiveness. You need to prove through actions, not words, that you're willing to change. And if she still wants a divorce, you respect that choice." He nodded, swallowing hard. It was a bitter pill to consider that he might not have a chance to fix what he had broken, but he resolved to try. The following morning, tensions still blanketed the mansion. Half of the extended family had decided to leave early, not wanting to be embroiled in the drama. Others lingered, hoping to support Samantha or Lucas in some way. Mason and Eliza were whisked away to a nearby cousin's house to shield them from the continuing turmoil, leaving the mansion eerily quiet. In a move that surprised no one, Alyssa attempted to contact Lucas repeatedly, demanding to know what was going on. Lucas ignored her calls. He had no idea how to face her or whether he had any intention of continuing their relationship. Truthfully, he knew the answer deep down. Alyssa was not who he wanted to spend his life with. She had been a diversion, a destructive, selfish choice that now threatened to dismantle everything he held dear. The silence in the house was deafening. Lucas wandered its corridors like a man lost in his own empire, haunted by memories embedded in every corner. Eliza's laughter echoing from the grand staircase. Mason's favorite blanket left on the armchair in the study. Samantha's favorite classical piano pieces lingering like ghosts from the speakers in the lounge. Every sound that once brought comfort now stabbed at him with unbearable regret. Around midday, Lucas finally mustered the courage to knock on Samantha's bedroom door. She had moved into a separate suite the night before, a clear sign of her intent to distance herself. He heard her voice granting permission to enter. Heart pounding, he stepped inside. Samantha stood by the window, wearing a simple white blouse and casual trousers. She had the bearing of someone who hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed with red and her face pale. Yet she maintained a quiet dignity that reminded Lucas of the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice trembling. The gravity of those words hung in the air, echoing off the pristine walls. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know I'm sorry. For lying, for betraying you, for all the pain I've caused." Samantha remained still, her gaze fixed on the sprawling estate outside. "You should have thought about that before," she replied, her voice hollow. "I'm beyond apologies right now. I just want to plan how we're going to move forward for the children's sake." Her words were steady, but behind them was a fortress barely standing. Her chest rose and fell in slow, controlled breaths, the kind you take when your heart is breaking, but your pride won't let you show it. She refused to cry in front of him. Not again. Not after all the nights she wept alone while he was off living a lie. Lucas's breath hitched. "I deserve that. But before we talk about anything else, I need you to know. My affair with Alyssa, it's over. Samantha turned to face him, tears glittering in her eyes. Over because you got caught, or over because you realized it was wrong? The question cut him deeply. There was no accusation in her voice, just exhaustion, and that somehow made it worse. He had hoped for rage, even hatred, but the indifference terrified him. He saw in her eyes not just pain, but the slow erosion of love into something colder, quieter, something final. Lucas closed his eyes, guilt twisting in his chest. I was selfish and stupid. I let myself get swept up in the thrill of it, the excitement, the attention. Maybe it was a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, but it was wrong. And now, seeing everything I risk losing, I understand how worthless it was compared to our family. Samantha let out a trembling breath. I used to believe you could never do something like this. I guess I was naive, Samantha said quietly. Or maybe just blinded by love. She paused, her eyes searching his face. I'm filing for divorce. I need you to understand that. Lucas's tears finally spilled over. He fell silent for a moment, shoulders slumped as though the weight of the entire world pressed upon him. I understand, he whispered. If that's truly what you want, I won't fight you. But I need you to know I'll do anything for a second chance. She looked away, tears sliding down her cheeks. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, she admitted. All these years, I believed in your integrity, your sense of right and wrong. And to know you could do this, to carry on lies for months. It's too much for me. Lucas nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I'll respect your decision. Whatever you decide, I'll cooperate. But please, Samantha, if there's even the slightest chance you might forgive me one day, I promise I'll work tirelessly to prove I deserve it. Samantha's face betrayed a flicker of compassion, a spark of the lingering love she still felt despite everything. But her resolve was firm. You need to leave, she said quietly. I want some time alone to think. The children will be back later, and I'll need to figure out how to explain all of this to them. Without further protest, Lucas left. He knew any attempts at emotional manipulation now would only deepen her mistrust. And although every fiber of his being wanted to hold her, to beg her not to finalize the divorce, he realized the irony of the situation. The dynamic entrepreneur who always found solutions and overcame obstacles was now powerless to fix what he had so heedlessly broken. Before Lucas could even begin to piece together his next move, an unexpected visitor arrived at the gates of the Everhart estate. Alyssa Madison. Dressed in a crisp black blazer and matching skirt, she looked every bit the polished financial consultant. Despite the commotion at the mansion, the security team recognized her from previous visits with Lucas and let her through, albeit reluctantly. She made her way to the main entrance, ignoring the uncomfortable glances from the household staff. Word had spread like wildfire among them. They knew who she was and why she was here. Alyssa, however, seemed determined, her chin set defiantly as she stepped into the foyer. She spotted Lucas descending the grand staircase. A swirl of emotions crossed his features. Shock, anger, guilt. He approached her, his voice low. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you, Alyssa said, her tone cold and clipped. You haven't been answering my calls. I heard what happened last night. The entire family knows, don't they? Alyssa exhaled sharply. I didn't sign up for this level of drama. Lucas's eyes blazed. Drama? You think this is just drama? My entire family is in turmoil because of us. Alyssa folded her arms. You mean because of your wife's overreaction? She made a scene in front of everyone. Lucas's jaw tightened. He felt a sudden surge of protectiveness for Samantha. Don't blame this on her. She has every right to be furious. We deceived her. Alyssa sneered. You're making me sound like the villain. You told me you were unhappy. That Samantha never understood your vision anymore. That the marriage was practically dead already. Guilt stabbed at Lucas. Yes, he had said those things in moments of weakness, looking for sympathy or validation. Now, those words felt like knives in his own back. Regardless of what I said in private, he replied, the reality is I made a commitment to her, and I broke it. He met her eyes. Alyssa, this is over. I can't continue this. She shook her head, disbelief and anger twisting her features. So that's it? You trash your marriage, and then you decide you don't want me either. Lucas sighed, a wave of exhaustion sweeping over him. I'm sorry. I never should have let this happen in the first place. Alyssa's eyes flashed. You can't just ghost me and expect me to vanish. Do you realize how much I've invested in our relationship, professionally and personally? He pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling a migraine coming on. I'll make sure your professional standing isn't compromised. If you need references, or if there's a position at Novacor. She cut him off, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, how generous. Thanks for the job offer, Lucas. But I didn't come here to negotiate a career move. You and I had something real, and you can't just toss me aside now that it's inconvenient. Lucas inhaled deeply. I'm not tossing you aside. I'm doing the only thing I can do, ending a relationship that was built on lies. The tension in the air was suffocating. Alyssa stared at him, her fury mingling with hurt. For a moment, she seemed on the verge of tears. Then her expression hardened. Fine, if that's how you want to play it. But don't expect me to keep quiet if Samantha decides to go public with this scandal. Don't forget, Lucas, I know plenty about your business dealings. The threat was clear, and it terrified Lucas on multiple levels. Not because he had shady dealings, she prided himself on legitimate, though aggressive, business strategies, but a public scandal could further devastate Samantha and the children. Before Lucas could respond, Samantha herself emerged into the foyer. She had heard the voices raised in argument from the adjacent corridor. Her gaze flicked between Lucas and Alyssa, her face momentarily slack with shock at the unexpected confrontation. Then she gathered herself, standing tall. You must be Alyssa, Samantha said, her tone icy but controlled. I suggest you leave. This is neither the time nor the place. Alyssa looked Samantha up and down for a heartbeat. Neither spoke, and Lucas could feel the pulse of tension like electricity in the air. Alyssa opened her mouth as if to retort, but perhaps sensing Samantha's unshakable resolve, she exhaled sharply, turned on her heel, and strode out. The silence that followed was heavier than the confrontation itself. Samantha's fingers curled slightly at her sides, though her face remained composed. Lucas watched the determination in her spine, the unspoken exhaustion behind her poise, and realized how much damage he had done, not just to their relationship, but to her peace. Lucas considered following Alyssa to prevent further conflict, but a single glance at Samantha's stricken face anchored him in place. They stood in silence until the echo of Alyssa's heels on the marble floor faded completely. Then Samantha closed her eyes, as if summoning the last remnants of her composure. Do me a favor, she said softly, meeting Lucas's gaze. Pack your things and leave. I need this house to myself for a while. I need to think without you here. He opened his mouth to object, to offer to stay in a separate wing, but the resolute grief in her eyes silenced him. All right, he said quietly. I'll go. But please, if you need anything, she simply shook her head and retreated down the hall. Lucas didn't follow. He couldn't. The sight of her retreating, shoulders squared, head held high, even as pain etched every line of her posture, was enough to keep him rooted where he stood. It was the walk of a woman who had finally chosen herself. Lucas watched her vanish into the shadows of the mansion, realizing it might be the last time he'd see her living under the same roof. Over the next few weeks, life became a whirlwind of legal consultations, custody arrangements, and painful public scrutiny. The press caught wind of Lucas's affair and Samantha's dramatic announcement. Though details were scarce, Samantha had refused to feed the gossip. Photographers camped outside law firms, hoping to catch a glimpse of either party. Society columnists spun sensational stories, some fueling speculation that Samantha was seeking an enormous settlement, while others labeled Lucas a typical billionaire philanderer. Each headline felt like another cut, reminders of a private collapse laid bare for the world. Lucas tried to shield the children from the chaos, but he knew the damage was already done. He saw it in Mason's silence, in Eliza's tentative glances. Lucas temporarily moved to a penthouse suite in Manhattan, drowning himself in work while simultaneously trying to reach out to Samantha through any means possible. He sent her heartfelt letters, apologizing for the pain he caused and promising to atone. He quietly arranged to funnel additional funding into the Everhart Fairwind initiative, hoping to show he was still committed to their shared dream of philanthropy. But each gesture was met with silence. Samantha, on the other hand, was drowning in her own turmoil. She had hired a reputable divorce attorney to represent her interests and protect her children's futures. Every day was an emotional roller coaster. One moment, Samantha was resolute in her decision. The next, she was haunted by memories of the man she still loved, the father of her children, the partner she had envisioned growing old with. Was there a space for reconciliation? Could she trust him not to stray again? Her parents tried to offer guidance, reminding her of her own strength and worth. Evelyn Marcus, her closest friend, was there daily, lending an ear or a shoulder to cry on. One afternoon, over cups of peppermint tea in Samantha's lounge, Evelyn posed a question that struck her deeply. When you think of your future, do you feel a spark of hope? Hope that maybe, just maybe, Lucas can still be part of it? Or does it feel too painful to imagine? Samantha sighed, staring at the swirling liquid in her teacup. I don't know. I'm angry, hurt, and yet there's a part of me that wonders if I'm losing not just a marriage, but a partner who, despite his mistakes, once cared for me in ways no one else ever has. What she didn't say aloud, what she hadn't even admitted to Evelyn, was that there had been a night just after discovering the affair when she almost walked away without telling anyone. She had packed a small overnight bag, stood at the threshold of the guest house, and seriously considered leaving everything behind. No confrontation, no scandal, just silence. Disappear to her parents' vineyard in Napa, vanish from the headlines and the pitying eyes. It was the children's sleeping faces that stopped her. That, and the tiny flicker of rage against the idea of letting Lucas escape consequence, letting him explain her absence in whatever narrative suited him. Evelyn nodded, empathizing. That's what healing is for. You don't have to decide your entire future right now. Take the time to grieve, to recover. If Lucas is truly remorseful, he'll give you the space you need. In parallel, Lucas was grappling with his own introspection. During one late-night walk through Central Park, where he and Samantha once danced to a street violinist, he broke down in tears. The memory of that magical night felt like it belonged to another world. Filled with regret, he started therapy, acknowledging for the first time that he might have an unquenchable drive for validation that led him astray. If he wanted any chance of salvaging his family, he needed to confront his demons. A few days later, Lucas arranged a private meeting with Samantha's attorney. He wanted to ensure that the property division and custody arrangements were handled respectfully. He insisted on equal joint custody of the children if Samantha was open to it, promising that he would do nothing to make the process acrimonious. He even considered stepping back from his role as CEO of Novacor to prioritize his family. The tech world might see it as a stunning move, Lucas Everhart relinquishing his power seat, but to him, it seemed like a necessary sacrifice to demonstrate how serious he was about making amends. This newfound humility gradually reached Samantha's ears, mostly through her attorney. Though still guarded, she could not deny that Lucas's actions indicated genuine remorse. Perhaps, she thought, he was finally seeing beyond the allure of success and status. She decided it would be beneficial for the children to see their father and that she could not let her bitterness overshadow their bond. So, she agreed to an afternoon meeting with Lucas at a public park where Mason and Eliza could play. The meeting was awkward at first. Lucas arrived early, dressed in casual clothes, a departure from his usual tailored suits. He held a bouquet of sunflowers, Samantha's favorites, and greeted his kids with visible nervousness. Mason was hesitant, standing stiffly as Lucas tried to hug him. But Eliza ran into his arms, burying her face in his shoulder as if forgetting, momentarily, the tumult of the past weeks. Samantha observed from a slight distance, her heart twinging at the sight. Lucas caught her gaze and approached with the flowers, offering them tentatively. "Thank you for letting me see them," he said softly. "They mean everything to me. And so do you, Samantha." She accepted the bouquet, biting her lip. "I'm doing this for them," she replied, her voice uneven. "They miss you." Lucas nodded. "I miss them. And you, more than I can say. I know words mean little right now, but I'm working to become the man you once believed I was." They spoke a bit more, while Mason and Eliza played on the swings, forging the first step on a fragile new path. That evening, Samantha found herself rethinking everything. Sometimes divorces are straightforward, a final break from an irreparable bond. Other times, they become the impetus for deep personal change. Could Lucas change enough to mend what he'd broken, or was it already too late? A beautiful ending. 2 years passed. The divorce papers remained unsigned, tucked away in a drawer in Samantha's studious silent testament to a truce that had slowly, painstakingly, blossomed into something more. Lucas never moved back into the glass castle. Instead, he bought a smaller, comfortable home just a few miles away. He had officially stepped down as CEO of Novacor, taking on a less demanding advisory role that allowed him to be present for every school play, soccer game, and parent-teacher conference. The grand gestures had ceased. In their place were small, consistent acts of trust. He sent her pictures of the kids on his weekends, not for approval, but just to share a moment. He called her to talk about his therapy sessions, sharing his vulnerabilities with an honesty she hadn't heard in a decade. They attended family counseling, first with the children, and then just the two of them. It was there in the quiet, neutral space of the therapist's office that they learned to talk again not as a billionaire and his ethereal wife, but as Lucas and Samantha. One crisp autumn evening, Samantha was in her garden, tending to her roses, when Lucas arrived to drop off the children. Mason and Eliza ran inside, their laughter echoing through the house. Lucas, however, lingered by the gate. "They're beautiful," he said, nodding toward the blooming flowers, "just like the ones at our wedding." Samantha smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. "These are stronger. They're a different breed, more resilient." She met his gaze, and in his eyes, she no longer saw the restless ambition or the haunted guilt. She saw the man she had first danced with, older and wiser, scarred but whole. "I have something for you," she said, wiping the dirt from her hands. She led him into her study, opened the drawer, and took out the thick envelope of legal documents. For a moment, his face fell, a flicker of the old fear returning. But instead of handing them to him, she walked over to the fireplace, where a low fire crackled. Without a word, she tossed the entire packet into the flames. They both watched as the paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. The words "dissolution of marriage" vanished in a wisp of smoke. A single tear slid down Lucas's cheek, but this time it was not one of sorrow. It was a tear of gratitude. "Samantha," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She turned to him. "Our old marriage is over, Lucas. It died that night at the reunion. But maybe we can build a new one." He stepped toward her, his hand gently finding hers. It wasn't the possessive grip of a man claiming a prize, but the tentative, respectful touch of a partner asking for a dance. "I would like that more than anything," he said. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They simply stood there, hand in hand, watching the last of their broken past turn to dust, a quiet promise of a future yet to be written. Their castle of glass had shattered, but on its foundation, they had built a home stronger, more transparent, and finally, truly their own. Call to action. The story of Samantha and Lucas has come to a close. If you're still here with me, perhaps something in their journey stirred your heart. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in Samantha's quiet strength, or in Lucas's fall from grace and his long road back. Life like this story is rarely simple. It's a complex tapestry of love and loss, betrayal and forgiveness, endings and new beginnings. We all face moments that test us, that force us to decide whether to walk away or fight for a second chance. This story reminds us that the most difficult paths can often lead to the most profound healing, and that true strength isn't about never falling, but about how we choose to get back up. Who or what in your life deserves another look? What part of yourself have you neglected in the name of keeping the peace? Let this story be a gentle reminder that you are the author of your own life, and it's never too late to start a new chapter. If this story moved you, made you think, or helped you feel a little less alone, please consider showing your support by liking this video, sharing it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribing to our channel. We believe every tale holds a mirror to life, and we're so grateful to share them with you. Until next time, keep growing, keep healing, and above all, keep choosing yourself.